Hey everyone, Margarita here. This is episode number 18 on my severe carbon monoxide poisoning, which initially went untreated. And I'm going to continue on with some of these symptoms here that you might be experiencing if you think you may be suffering from repeated exposures or you've had one large, very significant exposure. And some of these symptoms, they're going to be at different degrees of severity. And a big red flag that it's carbon monoxide poisoning is that they're all going to be occurring at one time. I do believe I left off with confusion and brain fog. That is a huge red flag. Those symptoms for me, that continued on for well over a year with no break from that whatsoever. And along with that would go tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, or hearing loss, or all of the above. It's all connected. And what it is neurotoxicity and the lack of oxygen to the brain. That's what causes those things. And I believe I mentioned ear candles in one of the other videos. So I did do another video on ear candles because I did have to do some. I've been having to do them daily due to my ongoing condition, the effects that I suffer from. And currently there is another gas leak caused by a Ford Motor Company where my home is. And that's the third time this has happened to me since my injury and since I've owned this home. So I'll get more into that later, but I'm going to post the video on the ear candles as well. Now, many people use ear candles for all different types of reasons, not just any of what I've been talking about. I do believe people use them regularly for whatever reason, and it will clear whatever the problem is. If you're having trouble hearing for any reason, or you feel like you have earwax buildup, they work for all of the above. So I will post that video as well. Same with the tinnitus, the hearing loss, all of that. It's all connected to the neurotoxicity, the amount of carbon monoxide loaded up in the brain. The more ear candles it takes to remove, the worse. That means the worse your poisoning is. Now with me, I believe I did around 100 ear candles within a month period in order to no longer be in an altered state of consciousness from the severe lack of oxygen to the brain. And that altered state of consciousness for me went on for 13 months straight until I did those ear candles. And at the same time, it helped reduce the tinnitus and remove quite a bit of it. And the hearing loss, you'll have sudden hearing loss where you'll lose, it's usually one ear and then the other, or it could just be one, or it could be both at the same time, or the amount of hearing that you had has been significantly reduced due to the carbon monoxide buildup in your brain, because it does go to the brain first. That is the organ that requires the most amount of oxygen. So the ear candles will reduce all of that. And mind you, if you are suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning and you need to do ear candles, you're going to want to do them. You're going to need a garage, a shed, an outdoor space where there's not wind, because the wind will affect them. You're not going to want to do those inside your home. So I will attach that video as well, or post it in its own category. It will be labeled ear candles, so anyone Googling that will be able to find that. I did do a whole video where I did an entire ear candle and then took it apart to show everybody what's inside. And for me, due to my brain tissue being open and the brain injuries, it is blood inside of my ear candles. That may not be the case with everybody else though. And I do want to mention that those also work for autistic children. They are neurotoxic, ADHD as well. That is what causes that, anxiety. You have children with that, it works for all of that as well. If you can get those children to lay still, it is a calming feeling and a calming effect. So if you can get them to, or maybe do one first and then let them watch and then get them to do that, it will reduce the amount of ADHD, hyperactivity, and the problems that they suffer from as well. Now that went on for me for quite some time, all of that well over a year. And it would come and go because I was having re-exposures along the way, and then eventually some re-injuries. So there's been some pretty significant ups and some pretty significant downs during my situation. Now, let's see here. I do believe I mentioned I was unable to work out anymore as soon as I beginning exposed to the carbon monoxide. That is a number one red flag if you've always worked out. And then the loss of the daily functioning and more fatigue. So that all kind of goes hand in hand. They will all generally happen at the same time from carbon monoxide. I do believe I mentioned the blood work, everything being off within the blood work and not correct. The carboxyhemoglobin will show a normal amount that's supposed to be in your blood, and everything else will be wrong in the blood work, either elevated or lower than it should be in all the different categories. Mine showed that I was very anemic and I had low potassium. And what it is carbon monoxide poisoning in blood work will mask as anemia because it's taking your hemoglobin. So it just looks like you're anemic to the people running the blood work because they're not educated on how it all works properly. I did have severe body aches, joint pain, muscle weakness, all of that. It's all connected because the oxygen is being taken from your entire system, and the oxygen is what creates energy and strength. So you'll be sore, you'll be in pain, you'll be weak. All of that occurs. It's all due to the same gas. Same one gas is causing all of these symptoms. There was, a daily headache. Mine was continuous for actually, and it's not even a headache. I had complete brain swelling for 34 and a half months before I had one day of relief. And even then, I had a significant setback right after that happened. And it took about another month of everyday treatment to get back to where I was right before that. And it was a very slight exposure because my system was so fragile. So, I guess you could call it a daily headache, or if you're repeatedly going to the place that's causing the carbon monoxide poisoning, or you live in the place, it will become a daily headache at some point during this, if you have not already overloaded. And then if you have, it will become brain swelling once you've taken in too much, or your brain will be pressed against your skull. So I guess mine was more considered a continuous toxic headache because it is caused by a toxin, which is replacing your oxygen. So it's toxic hypoxia is what it is. And if you do not remove it quickly enough, remove yourself from the area that's causing this, eventually it will cause a brain swelling episode, or your brain will remain pressed against your skull until you've removed enough of it and removed yourself from what's causing it and removed enough of it from your system. Now, in my case, I wasn't sure right away what was causing all of it. So it went on for about 2 weeks in that extreme manner before my brain exploded internally and it broke all the way through, because those are the neurotoxins or the carbon monoxide. That's what's pressed, that's your blood-brain barrier getting ready to break through, because that's what filters out all of the toxins. And it's compromised because you've taken in so much that it can't process that many toxins. And that's what creates that continuous toxic headache or the brain swelling. Now, once it breaks all the way through, you're past the point of no return. So it's going to be very hard to pick up the pieces of your life once you reach that point. So I'm trying to prevent somebody from ever even reaching that point in the first place, because it did take me a couple of weeks to figure out what had gone on, what was going on, what was causing all this. And again, mine was delayed by 4 days. So it made it even harder to figure all of this out. But eventually it did all come out and it became 100% known. So another big red flag is other people around you. If you don't see everybody else around you experiencing some sort of symptoms, it's probably not that place. Or if you go to work and everybody there is experiencing symptoms, that's your red flag. If it's in your home and everybody has some sort of something going on, that's a big red flag. Initially, it can present itself as a flu-like type of illness, but it's more extreme than that. And it's, you'll know because it'll continue on longer than a regular flu bug would continue for. So that's another red flag as well. Let's see here. Now, I gave birth while suffering from it. So because I said it creates severe pain in the entire body, because without oxygen, it creates pain. Everything hurts, especially your joints, your muscles, any old injuries. Now, I was in labor, so that created more extreme pain on top of the extreme pain I was already in. It was probably the most extreme case of a natural labor and delivery one could ever go through and still be alive in the end. Now, mind you, I did not come out okay. I went into the hospital to have a baby, and I never returned to normal afterwards. And part of that is due to the hospital's cover-up as well. And the hospital I had the baby at was completely unrelated to the hospital my mother worked for. And that whole system and those crimes, this was completely unrelated. No one actually knew where I was going to have the baby. So that was that hospital separately. That was their own cover-up. And it made everything way more extreme, way worse. I was supposed to have a water birth, and they denied me the tub of water for numerous reasons. Each person had a different excuse. But I'll get more into that, because there was more going on there than, what I had initially mentioned in the beginning when I started talking about being in labor while suffering from it. But it does make it very extreme if that is the case with you. The contractions will be harder, stronger, faster. You'll be in a lot more pain, and not just that, but your entire body will be in pain. And if you're not being given oxygen, you will start losing communication skills and having neurologic problems while this is going on. So that made labor and delivery much harder than it ever needed to be, because the simple answer would have been to give me some oxygen. And then everything would have been fine. It wouldn't have gone on the way it did, and I wouldn't have returned to the place that caused all of this. Due to all of that and what the hospital did, that at the base is the reason I returned to the source of the poisoning. Giving birth there with no oxygen while suffering from that. So I'll get into that in its own video. Now, I did have quite a bit of hair loss. I was losing hair in a significant amount of it during the time I was, as soon as I started working at the place, it started coming out in handfuls. And then shortly after I'd had the baby, I was pretty overloaded with the carbon monoxide within my system. It just had not broken through my brain, but there was a brain injury. So there was quite a bit of hair loss coming out in handfuls, just tons of it. It went on for months. Actually, I think it went on for almost 2 years, pretty much until I removed myself from the place after I became completely overloaded with the carbon monoxide. By the time the baby was almost 2 years old. So this went on for about 2 years with the extreme hair loss, all during the beginning of the exposure, after having the baby, going back to the place, all during working at that place, that second round of employment for that year of weekends. I was losing excessive amounts of hair. The people in my home that shared the shower with me were all saying something about my hair. And I've always had long hair and a lot of hair, and that's never been the case for me. So that was a huge red flag if you're losing that much hair. And at one point, I did notice my face showed quite a bit of aging. At this point, I have been through quite a bit of hyperbaric oxygen treatments, so it may have reversed some of that, where I don't really look so unwell anymore, and those age spots and those wrinkles, they may not be as prevalent as they were right after I became overloaded with the carbon monoxide and I remained very sick for those few years. So a lot of that has been reversed, and that's only due to the fact that I've had over 500 hyperbaric oxygen treatments to this day. So that is reversible if you do eventually receive treatment. But I did receive more age spots and more wrinkles due to that. And at one point, shortly before I overloaded with the carbon monoxide, I looked in the mirror and saw that half of my face was drooping. And I had not really been looking in the mirror all that frequently for that 2-year period. I was so unwell and taking care of a newborn who was extremely hard to take care of because he was suffering from the same thing and not sleeping well and not able to piece daily life back together. I was not really looking in the mirror, but at one point I did, and I did notice half of my face was drooping. I didn't have any explanation for it. I just kind of shrugged it off. And if you see that, that is a big red flag. Those are stroke-like symptoms and brain injury-related symptoms. So that's something that you should be looking into if you are experiencing that or notice something like that. And I did have my fingernails and my toenails. They were purple. By the time I got to the point where I was about to overload with the carbon monoxide, and afterwards for years, several years, probably until I had several hundred treatments, my fingernails and toenails were purple, and some of my toenails were black. The ones closest to the end of my foot. So like my pinky toe, the one next to it, my middle one, those ones were those ones were actually black. But my fingernails remained purple for years as well. So due to that, there was no oxygen getting to basically your extremities. That's the furthest from your heart. So that takes longer to get the oxygen to, and you don't have enough oxygen. So your fingertips and your toes aren't getting enough oxygen. That is a very, very big red flag. And now it has pretty much returned to somewhat normal. I think I do have like a couple of toenails that may still be a little purple or black even, but that's only due to how many re-exposures I've had, how many re-injuries I've had, and the lack of being able to maintain at least maintenance treatments, which has been about a year since that has occurred. So those are some very, very big red flags. I did have some toxic blisters, I called them. And that was due to the blood-brain barrier being completely disintegrated, completely gone from the top of my brain. That's the filter that filters all the toxins from your system if they enter your system. Anything that came into my system that was a toxin, it would go straight through my bloodstream, straight out my skin, and it would cause toxic blisters because it's not supposed to be entering in one system like that. If the blood-brain barrier is intact and working properly, that's what stops all that. So that stuff should not be getting into your system. And with me, it was. So I was experiencing quite a bit of those. And that does still happen to this day. If I have a re-exposure, even if I have one right now, tomorrow I'll wake up with a huge toxic blister. They're not like regular pimples, but they do sort of resemble them. And you can pop them, but they will leave a gaping hole and possibly a scar. And it comes out in buckets of sweat as well. So if you have a re-exposure, you'll be sweating excessively because there's no blood-brain barrier to stop anything from entering your system. So everything goes right through and it comes right out. So the buckets of sweat and the toxic blisters, they kind of go hand in hand. I did mention that my brain was in a very fragile state. It still is to this day. A big problem I have with that is other people are ignorant to my condition. And, you know, especially because I have long hair and it's shiny, people want to pull on it for some reason or another. And my brain is being repaired. The blood-brain barrier, the brain tissue is being repaired. So that will actually disrupt the repairing of it and reverse what's been repaired because it is so fragile. Nothing can, I can't be hit in the head. I can't have my hair pulled on. There's numerous problems. And then with all the sound and the activity and the noise, your brain is still extremely fragile. It's more of a problem with other people's ignorance at that point. But I do remain in a continuous fragile state. So does my entire system. So anything, I come in contact with or particles in the air that normal people would be able to tolerate, that's intolerable for me. And again, other people are ignorant to that. And not just that, but when you're extremely overloaded the way I was the first few years, it's not just your brain that's in a continuous fragile state, it's your entire system and all of your cells as well. So when there's all these stressors and you have a sensory hypersensitivity and all this action is going on or screaming, loud noises, people talking or slamming cupboards or anything like that, it's going to cause you to start shaking because your system is so fragile. Every cell is extremely fragile. Or if you have a slight re-exposure, it's going to cause shaking. It looks like a mental disorder and or a drug problem. So then people make up their own assumptions about what they think they're seeing within you. And that causes other problems. So, if you're Googling on somebody else's behalf, be mindful that that is the case. And since they're not processing oxygen properly, the way they're talking may sound like they have a mental disorder or a drug problem. And it's because of just the displacement of the oxygen not being processing properly within your system. So that's another issue. And I'm going to come back and talk more about the symptoms within a child or a baby or an unborn baby and the result of that from carbon monoxide poisoning in utero and or as a small child or baby. So I'll be back with another one. Thanks. Bye.